So it took me more than a decade to write this book, unfortunately. And I must say that I didn't intend to write the type of the book that ultimately was published. When I began thinking about this book, I was thinking about something completely different. I'm a legal historian, but I also teach the basic tax course at my home institution, Tel Aviv University. And when I was teaching tax cases, I felt very frustrated because I could tell my students about the doctrinal aspects of the cases, but I didn't know anything about the political or cultural or economic context. And there were all these cases that I really wanted to know more about. Among them, an important tax avoidance case called Mefi, which was decided by the Israeli Supreme Court in 1967. And there was nothing about the context, the historical context of this case. But there was a model that I could use. There's a legal historian, Robert B. Stevens, who wrote a book in the 1970s about the British House of Lords. It's called Law and Politics, the House of Lords as a Judicial Body. And it examines all sorts of cases, among them tax cases, placing them in the political and economic and cultural context of their time. And I thought that I could use the approach that Stevens' book advocates in analyzing cases such as Mefi. And that's what I did. It's actually the last chapter of the book, chapter 6, was the first chapter that I actually wrote. It's an analysis of the history of this specific tax avoidance case, a milestone in Israeli tax law in the transition from a pro-taxpayer to a pro-government approach to tax avoidance. And after I wrote an article about the Mefi case, I also wrote an article about British tax avoidance cases in the 1930s and another article about American tax avoidance cases in the 1930s. And my idea was to write a comparative legal history of tax avoidance cases in Israel, the UK, and the United States. But when I started enlarging the Israeli part of the book, looking more deeply into the history of tax avoidance and tax evasion, the economic and social and cultural history, I found so many materials that ultimately I ended up with a book which is only focused on the Israeli case. So it didn't come out as a comparative or transnational book. It's merely focused on one specific tax jurisdiction, although I think the story that I tell is relevant to other jurisdictions too.